sold everything I had. But a friend of mine that was taking care of my stuff at the time happened to come by when that was going on and called the police, and they came up and they called me at the prison and asked if I wanted this person arrested that had broke into my house and was selling my stuff. I'm like, well, who is it? And they said it was my sister. And I said, no, I'm not going to have family arrested no matter what they're doing. I know how they are. So,
well, on top of that, where the system you're living in, where she would have been going to, and I'm sure you wouldn't wish that upon anyone.
Oh no, I couldn't put anybody through that. So the family support has never been there. So I didn't expect any family support, but my family has been close friends, that have become my family that I haven't had. So I do get a sense of family from those friends around me, a kind of a sense of what family is. And
are your siblings, are they close? Do they get together for things? And
my two sisters are close, and my brother is 800 miles away.
But you don't hang out with them, but they hang out together.
Yeah, they hang out together. I don't know. I guess I've always had a helping spirit regardless of what I go through. There was a time in my life when I would hold a grudge or want revenge, but a lot of that has changed since going through what I've gone through. I don't have that vengeful type of
desire.
Yeah, anymore. Or I try to understand what the person may be responding to or reacting to. To me, that's more important than some kind of retaliation now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how can I help them in their situation, regardless of their behavior right now? How can I help them? Because chances are other people won't. So I think it's important being in a situation where you have to fend for yourself and you don't feel any support underneath you makes me anyways want to try to be there for somebody else, so they don't have to experience that,
Learn from your misfortunes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yep.
Can we, there's one final thing I would like to ask, and then I know Dan had some things. I would just like to get what it's been like for you to find work and how that's worked out for you. Because there's a lot of people out there that I'm sure are having a really hard time finding work. I have a cousin who has a violent misdemeanor, and, it's so hard for him to find work. He's doing like a graveyard shift somewhere.
I see. The funny thing is, the felony that I have is the lowest felony that there is. It's one step above a misdemeanor. Okay. Misdemeanors are classified A, B, C, D, E, with A being the strongest misdemeanor. Felonies are classified the same way, A, B, C, D, with degrees on them. Well, the charge can have a degree, but the felonies are A, B, C, D, E is the lowest felony. Mine is a Class E felony, but I got two of them. That's the way they had to get me to take the plea bargain, charge me again, and keep doing it until... So, but anyways, a Class E misdemeanor is a nonviolent, so the time that I had to do in prison doesn't really fit the classification felony, which should have been 1 to 3 years running concurrent. Okay. But they did it 3 times over and ran consecutively. So that means you got to do 1 to 3, then 1 to 3, then 1 to 3. So
You know what we didn't talk about? I really feel bad for bringing this up so late, but whatever the issue was that there was something going on with the big corporate monopoly business that you were talking about. There was something going down, like a deal, perhaps you were mentioning.
right.
Do you think, did it take a while for that to get done, and maybe that was why they were extending your situation, or do you think there was no factor in that?
Yeah, the reason that I had to get so much time was to protect them, because some of the crimes that they are guilty of have a statute of limitations that doesn't run out for 5 to 7 years. So they have to keep me locked up for that amount of time so I'm not a threat to them anymore. Now, once the statute of limitations ran out, it doesn't matter what I bring against them, it won't stick. Okay, because it's too late. So, yeah, they had to keep me in at least 5 years. That's the majority of the felonies have a 5-year statute of limitations. So that was the reason behind it, because otherwise it would have been a 1 to 3 run concurrent, and I would have done 2 years in prison and had a year of parole.
So, let's just talk about, you came out, you have this house that you got to pay off still. I mean, you got mortgage, right?
Third time over.
Yeah. Rough, man. It's
Yeah.
heavy. So what do you do for work? How have you maintained for work without being specific, but
Yeah. Well, that's where friends come into play again, you know. They know my work ethic, and I was offered work through friends of mine. Basically, I work for myself. However, they provide the jobs for me, and it works. I was working through temp agencies before. Inside, I know that no matter what, I'm going to find work. You know, I'm going to find work. I'm not afraid to work, and it doesn't matter what it is. If they're willing to train me, if it's something I don't know, I can pick it up, and I'll be there to do it, you know, because you got to support yourself and everything that comes along with it. So my friends basically made it easier for me. So I didn't have to struggle with a lot of hardship that way, although I did do some real monotonous work for a while until I got that. But so yeah, it's hard for prisoners coming out of prison, regardless of what their crime is. And if they do have a sex crime of any sort, it's even harder for them because they can't work just anywheres, you know. So, but for all inmates coming out of prison, work is a tough situation because business owners don't want to deal with it. Is that what?
Yeah, that works. That's fine.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't have too much more. I'll let Dan. You want to continue with what you were going to talk about?
Yeah. No, I think that pretty much covered all the questions. I think the last question that we would have then is, how has God led you through this? Where did He really start to come into play for it with you? You know, when did your relationship with Christ really begin?
I don't always feel faithful, and being brought up in a secular home, nothing about God, nothing about any religion. I mean, probably even the word religion, I might have got slapped for saying that, you know. It was that way. It's like I had no sense of anything biblical or anything to do with God. So I didn't have God to turn to even when I was a kid. I didn't know about God. When I went in the service, when I went in the Army, I went on this weekend. It was called a weekend away or something or other. It was sponsored by a church in the Midwest. So I'm a very independent kind of guy. So I just hopped on this bus and went wherever they were going. Hey, I was in. So I went to it, and it was a big, like a retreat. They had evangelists speaking about God. I didn't know anything about it. So there came the part of the evening where they're asking people to come down to be saved. I didn't even know what that meant, you know. So I went down, you know. I'm going to go down and get saved. So, you know, I'm thinking, well, I'm in the military. I probably should be saved, whatever that means. And I went down and, you know, they like put a hand on my head or on my back or something and prayed, had me say something. And I thought I was saved. But did I feel different? No. Did I believe anything different? No. But they said I was saved. So that was the first time I got saved. I've been saved more than once. Okay. So time goes by, and, you know, I meet the girl that becomes my wife from a very religious Christian background. So dinners at her house, we're praying over meals. We're going to church, went to different churches, and people are being saved. And, you know, my future wife says, well, have you been saved? I'm like, well, yeah, I've been saved. Still not really knowing, you know, what that means. And I mean, I was going to churches where people were like falling on the floor, you know, or I don't know, different things were happening, like really weird stuff. So I'm like, wow, you know, people are being saved and stuff. And, you know, I didn't go through any of that. I still didn't know much about the Bible, the words, Jesus, any of that. But as I went through my marriage, I learned more because my wife would read the Bible before going to bed, you know, and we started praying at least our dinner meal. I don't know why that one specifically, but, you know, and the kids we brought up in a little country church. So I learned more there about Jesus and about the Bible. So then I told my wife, I said, well, I was saved, and I told her just what I told you guys. And I said, but I don't feel any different. And so she suggested that I get saved, really saved, you know, because she didn't think I was really saved. So I got saved again at one of the churches that we were going to at the time. But there wasn't the belief. Okay. Now, without the belief, are you really saved? No, you're not. So I'm like, okay, well, I must be saved this time because I'm with my wife and she knows about this stuff, you know.
Professionally saved.
Yeah, I've learned more about it. So now time goes by, and my kids are baptized. And then eventually, when I got in jail, you know, this last time when I was going to prison, I would go to the different church activities, not necessarily to worship, but to get away and do something different. Mm-hmm. I really didn't know what to expect. Even when I'm officially saved, what can I expect? You know, what can I feel? But in prison, I started reading the Bible. I started reading, and that was part of this one prison I was at. It was so horrible that was part of my routine. At certain times when I knew there was going to be a lot of crap going on, then I would read the Bible. And I read the whole thing twice. And, you know, it starts sinking in little by little to this guy that was never exposed to it, but I was exposed to the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny